I'm Glenn. I'm also better known as Mr. Welch. I'm currently working on converting the Mastara book, and I'm pretty much a hack that'll write anything that people pay me to write. Though mostly I'm a journalist for a magazine.
Hi, I'm Andy. I work as the project manager at Vasa Games. I've been a long-running GM geek player, and I'm happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Todd. I'm Hext Press. I write and talk about RPG stuff and also be creating my own materials coming up.
I'm Andrew. I'm line developer for 1879 at Vasa Games, the steampunk replacement for Shadowrun in our cosmology, sequel to Earth Dawn. I also do a bunch of other design stuff and world building stuff and just sort of hold forth in general.
Hi, I'm Aurelian. I'm a writer by trade, mostly for scripts, TV, animation, television, and feature films. And I'm currently writing and about to launch the Cody Hall of Adventure, a Korea-based D&D campaign setting.
All right, your topics are in chat. Pick one at your leisure. Go at it.
Well, Glenn, you have top of the round, so why don't you pick first?
Let me find my D5 real quick.
Uh-oh.
I killed Glenn.
Oh, no, that wasn't me.
Oh. Good, I didn't kill Glenn. Yay.
I've lived through 10 hurricanes. They ain't made something to kill me yet.
I have a lot of talents.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me see. We've got character alignment systems. That's always a good one.
It's mine.
Especially
so I like that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 3.0. I mean, when we're talking character alignment systems, you got there's D&D, then there's other stuff as well.
Oh yes.
D&D back in the 3.0 because of their focus on, I guess, the cosmology, good and evil, and law and chaos had a lot of stuff to do with it because they dealt with so many in the planes. But in 5th edition, they really didn't do anything with it at all. But as far as as a DM's tool, it's almost invaluable because it tells you how something's going to react on the fly when you come across it.
But that's saying that they play how you think the alignments are played. One of the things that I've noticed lately... Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying for like creatures... when they're going to be, when the DM has to play a creature, you can look down and see this is lawful neutral or this is chaotic evil. This is how it's going to react to the players.
Oh, for monsters, yeah. See, I was playing with a friend, and she starts out with, "Oh, your character is actually evil, and that's not what you have on there." And I'm like, "How do you consider my character evil?" And she was like, "Well, your character did this thing." And I'm like, "Yeah, did you not notice the 5 other things she did first to try to alleviate the situation before it got to that thing?" Then she comes like 2 games later, "Oh, your character isn't neutral. Your character is good." And I'm like, wait a minute. 2 sessions ago, you said she was evil. Because what I found is that people don't agree on what makes one good, evil, neutral. And then you go into other systems where you have things like selfish as an alignment, and riffs. I know. Riffs. But you go into this and no one is purely good, no one is purely evil. So when a character strays, how does that play in? Is even alignment work for that, except for things like detect alignment spells and things like that? So I've been really questioning whether the alignment system is useful because everyone seems to define it differently. Does that make sense?
I think it can be useful, but I think you kind of hit it on the head as far as the table needs to come up with those agreements over what the different alignments mean each character, and then you get on the same page, and then you can utilize it, as a tool. But I mean, like anything, if everyone's coming from different directions and you never confirm what everybody believes, then yeah, it's going to be problematic. But I don't think it has to be that way. I don't think that's a natural outcome of using alignments, that everybody is confused. You just have to work that stuff out.
I haven't run a system with an alignment mechanic in so many years. I'm not sure I'm really even qualified to talk here. But as far as creature encounters, I go with the motivations for creatures. Is it hungry? Does your party look like food? Does your party look like it could beat this creature, in which case it's probably going to run away rather than attacking? Is it mating season for this creature? Is it, being territorial? Does it have young to protect? I look at the reasons why you would actually have a creature encounter in real life, and play it from there. As far as people have motivations. They have character traits. Like I said, I haven't found an alignment system to even be useful in 20 years.
It does feel like the alignment has can have two sides of the coin in a way. I find that for a lot of not young, but new players, it helps a lot because it's role playing, right? And the truth is, most of us don't actually know how we would react if we had a massive troll in front of us that was about to attack us, because that's the point of role playing. We get into it, we imagine it, and we try to act like heroes. But when you just start, it seems like it's very difficult to know how to be consistent. Because sometimes you want to do something, sometimes you want to do something else. But that's not how the psyche really is. And for beginner players, this is a helpful tool. It doesn't mean that it always has to be referred to, but for beginner players, it helps a lot. Then you get the other extreme where people who are very, very willing to dig deep into character choices, not switching, but going from one extreme to the other can be an interesting look into the game and the psyche of the character. And there was one campaign where one of the players went from being a good person to do horrible things, and then the DM actually stepped in and said, well, if you're gonna do this, then your alignment is gonna change, and then you're gonna have to play your new alignment. So it's just a useful tool. I don't think every group actually uses it.
I think most groups nowadays, at least as far as D&D, don't really use it, or maybe just pay it lip service. I agree. I think it can be a good tool to help flesh out a character. I like playing with alignments when I'm playing because I like how it puts bounds on what I can do. I think oftentimes it seems like I feel that a lot of players don't want those kind of boundaries. They want to just be able to. They want to be kind of unfettered in their actions, which is fine. And so then alignments become more restrictive and maybe constricting in a way that they don't enjoy.
It's a holdover from the old Michael Moorcock, Elric series, which they TSR borrowed heavily from when they were writing the game.
Yeah, I did appreciate, or I liked more the just kind of law chaos divide as opposed to the sort of 8-point star or whatever it is. I thought that made things a little more interesting, since some creatures that were evil were also on the side of law, but they were clearly, not creatures you want to deal with, and it just being in chaos didn't necessarily mean that you were bad either. You could be sort of good, and you had a lot more wiggle room as far as a creature within there, how you wanted to act, but you had to pick sort of your universal team that you were fighting for eventually as one of those two poles, which I dug it. I liked it a lot.
And there are some games where the alignment is important, like the old Star Wars D6, but that also defined the dark side and the light side extensively, so players knew exactly where they had to fall.
Yeah, I definitely one aspect of alignments that could help a lot is if it's merged back in with kind of divinity and the roles that gods and religions play, because when you have literal gods that are physically around and they have sort of either alignments or codes of conduct or different behaviors or different things that they like and don't like, then it's a little bit easier, more concrete to talk about, well, if you're going to follow core, then this is what core likes and this is what core doesn't like, and you can choose which one of these gods you want to follow, and that kind of makes it a little bit easier and maybe more concrete than sort of the fluid, what's in everybody's opinion alignment.
I've got a system that I'm working on in a Patreon that I call Dynamic Balances. It uses sliders for your attributes instead of static numbers. For one of the game worlds, there is a slider called Favor. And whether you are in favor or out of favor depends upon your character's compliance with the moral and behavioral code of the culture and the dominant religion. If you have transgressed against the code of the dominant faith, your character is disfavored and you are at some minuses on your die rolls, and you may just accept that and carry on with whatever you want to do, or you may try to go do acts of atonement and so forth and get back into favor. It's not a good, bad thing so much as it's an approval and disapproval thing coming from the powers that be. So I think that sort of thing can really be useful, but it depends on how you implement it. I think we've all agreed that the definition of where the boundaries are and what the behaviors on each side of that boundary are is really critical.
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely needs to be clear if we want players to be able to make intelligent choices over where they want to fit in those alignments or where they want to be. That they need to know where those lines are.
So it sounds like it's a really good session 0 discussion. Session 0 beginning table.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't see that happening, but I think you're right, and it needs to happen more because I don't think people think about the fact that not everyone defines everything the same way.
I think a session 0 is more important for some styles of gameplay. When I run a sandbox campaign, session 0 is absolutely critical because I have to know what sort of characters are people wanting to play, what kind of storyline are they going to be looking for, and so on. Whereas if I'm running a scenario or module, it's a lot less important. The adventure is already set up, and you need to create characters that are going to work for that adventure. I'm sorry, that's really going off on a tangent, but it also comes back around to having that discussion of, are you using an alignment mechanic, and if so, where does it land as far as behaviors and moral code and so forth?
Well, I'm going to ask extension question. Because we did discuss that there are different types of alignment sets depending on the game. Is there anyone who has a strong favoring of a certain type of alignment set? Such as, I don't really care for Rifts as a game for reasons, but I do like their alignments. Anyone else have one
Personally,
that
I
they just
prefer it.
Which game was that?
Rifts.
Refs.
I was going to say, go ahead, Glenn.
I was going to say I prefer if the alignment systems are custom tailored to the settings because, well, that makes a lot more sense, and plus it personalizes the setting for you. Not all alignments have to be, certain names. Like the 40K system had the corruption system. But, it deals with a lot of stuff because you can have the same game and have the alignment mean something different. The alignment in Forgotten Realms is a lot different from the alignment in Planescape.
How so?
Well, Planescape actually has mechanics dealing with law, evil, chaos, and all that stuff. And if you, because you're dealing heavily with the outer planes, which they're the living embodiment of alignments, and it actually causes game mechanics if you are lawful or evil in certain areas, and if you're too lawful or you're too evil. Even certain planes, if they have too many people of a certain alignment, they'll get yanked into a different plane.
Okay, so your actions can actually displace you physically.
In Planescape, yes, that's a major aspect of the setting.
Wow, that seems extreme.
Well, it's a matter of the internal logic of the game world. As long as it is well defined and consistent, this is one of the problems that I had with alignment systems 20 years ago, and one of the reasons why I quit using them, because they simply weren't consistent. It keeps looping back to getting it defined clearly.
Oh, to answer Geberon's question, in the game 7th Sea, they did have a reputation count as alignment, but unfortunately, because it was if you did certain good deeds for certain people, it was positive, even if you made everybody else angry. So it didn't really work that well in 7th Sea because it was just on a good-bad spectrum.
And the last time I played 7th Sea, we didn't use anything like an alignment system, which was good because my character was a total jerk. Very cold-blooded, very, shall we say, ruthlessly practical.
Pragmatic.
Pragmatic is a good word for it. At one point, we ran across somebody on the road, and my character, realizing that we really couldn't leave witnesses to our having passed, said, "Look, I'm going to pay this guy off and walk him back to his village." And I pulled out a coin and gave it to the guy, walked him about 100 yards into the woods, cut his throat, took the coin, and went back to the group. So, yeah, I probably would have come off as a very much of an evil character, but if I had left that NPC, that guy, the guards who were chasing us, who were decidedly on the wrong end of the situation. I mean, they were, classic evil empire type of thing, corrupt noble, yada yada. We were actually trying to do some good in the world, but in order to accomplish that, somebody had to do some really bad things. So, does the ends justify the means in terms of alignment? If you are working for the greater good, but you have to kill an innocent to save a city, how does that sort out?
How innocent would the person have to be that he would actually save a city?
Well, and to use the example I just cited, this was a farmer that gave us directions on the road, had nothing to do with the situation at all, just was in the wrong place at the wrong time, classic innocent bystander. But if our pursuit found him and got any direction from him, we might have been delayed long enough that the city we were on our way to save could have been leveled with the loss of everybody in it. So, like I said, my character was ruthlessly practical. I killed this one guy in order to get to the destination in time to save a lot more lives. How does that hit your alignment system? That is there a hard and fast rule that you don't kill the innocent, even if it means saving more lives as a result? Again, this is one of the reasons why I don't like alignment systems. They get bogged down into these.
Right. It does feel like that would really be group or DMs dependent, because if it comes down to discussing the minutiae of this specific action and it would impact the movement, the forward movement of the actual gameplay, I think most DMs would care more about the narrative than that kind of minutiae would just not care so much.
Again, it just kind of depends on the game. We had a game, Star Wars, Saga Edition, so D20 based. And the way that the book reads is that if you use the Force in a bad way or one of the Force powers that's considered dark side, you would get dark side points. You get too many dark side points, and the GM takes your character sheet away because now you're a dark side person, right? But it says if you're using the Force. So if you don't use the Force, let's say one of your party members has been kidnapped, and you, as far as the party sees it, they've used up every other avenue except they have this one guy who could tell them, and the guy's refusing to tell them. Well, how far do you go to get your friend back? And if you do something that would count as torture, well, that's pretty evil, right? But you're trying to save your friend who they're probably going to torture and or kill. So it can. And again, I think that a lot of it, you guys are correct in the fact that it needs to be discussions at the beginning, but it still leads into, well, discussions, right?
Wasn't there a rule in that game that just thinking about using dark side lightning gave you dark side points?
I don't remember it that way. I do know that if you use Force Lightning, even if you are saving Mother Teresa and 12 orphans, it's a dark side point. However, if you just stab the person, like if you just randomly walk up to someone, stab them, and rob them, it would not be a dark side point because you didn't use the Force, which turned into a big. You see what I'm saying? That's why it turned into kind of a, well, but no, but yes, but no. And then you get into things like the moral quandary of if as far as the people, the party, as far as the players are concerned, they have explored every avenue that they can come up with, and the only thing that's left is get the information from this guy. At what point is it now evil to torture to save your friend from bad people, right? Like alignment stuff gets into quandaries.
Well, it's that morality stuff, right? Because are you someone who believes that torture is always evil, or are you someone who believes that it's mostly evil, but then certain situations make it okay? And obviously in the Star Wars world that they're dealing with, they're saying essentially torture is always evil, regardless of the outcome.
Actually, but they don't. Well, I mean, one of the players did, or the GM did in that game, but the books itself don't, because the dark side points only come if you use a Force power that's dark or in a dark way.
Yeah.
So now you can mundanely torture people, and it's okay.
Well, I think I don't remember.
Real quick before
go ahead. No, sorry. Go for it.
Real quick before he kicks us to the next topic. Star Wars D6 had the similar, but if you committed evil, you got a dark side point. If you use the Force to commit evil, you got an extra dark side point.
That sounds right. I have the Westinghouse.
West
Side
Games.
There you go. I have it. It's on a shelf. I haven't looked at it or played it in years, but it's on a shelf. But that sounds right.
Next topic. X-Pex is kicking us here.
I guess I'll pick, because we're going to do it in order, I guess. So let's see. I guess let's do with the increasingly disturbing gatekeeping that is going on regarding purity tests.
Okay.
Can someone explain that one?
Yeah. Gatekeeping, period, is bad, full stop. What is this purity test thing? Because the only thing I remember about that was a thing that we used to do back in junior high school.
Well, there's a increasing thing where people are going back through people's pasts to make sure that they've done absolutely nothing wrong or something that they get offended by. And if they have, then they get attacked for something that they've done before in the past, or written something, or using someone's past to say that they cannot participate or write.
So I don't think, well, maybe that's what it is. Because what the rare occasion that I've had people talk about, like purity type of tests, well, maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe that's what it is. See, I was thinking but really, do you actually play type of stuff? But I guess that wouldn't be a purity test.
Well, it's an ambiguous way of saying it, but it's basically
okay.
Do you have a clean background?
Yeah, if
Could
it's
you just
based
explain
on
what is purity taste?
I think what they're looking what it's a reference to compliance with current standards of behavior and morality. Let me
Okay.
just throw something in here. I've seen this sort of ideological purity gatekeeping a lot in political activism, and it can be really damaging or necessary or both at the same time. If somebody is currently being a massive jerk, they probably shouldn't be allowed around other people until they clean up their behavior. If they screwed up at some point in the past and have sorted their stuff out since then, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt at least. We've all said and done really stupid stuff in our past. Having something that I did 20 years ago brought up now to determine whether or not I'm allowed to participate, and giving it more weight than my current actions, I think would be really very bad.
Well, then you go,
And
I think, and then you go into things like, okay, what counts as really bad? So, for example, I teach. Yeah, this is going to out me, and so don't get me in trouble. But I do teach concealed carry. Though I teach it for charity. I've made a lot of money for lots of charities. I've done free courses for retired vets. But there are people who would say that simply because I did anything with guns, it makes me a bad person. So you have that type of stuff too. Whereas, what's the line? What makes you bad versus good?
Yeah, guns are tools. How do you use them? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Welch, please.
Oh, I was going to say, most recently, White Wolf had a kerfluffle because someone wrote about, I think it was Dagestan, a province of Russia, where they had people going out and killing gays. And they mentioned it in their vampire game. And one of the bad guys was one of these guys doing that. But because the character was doing something cruel to homosexuals, that had a massive backlash, and they had to kill the book. And it was actually happening in real life, but because they didn't want this guy to talk about it, he wasn't allowed to talk about it.
Oh,
yeah, there was actual political pressure from the government involved, as I recall. There was a protest filed. It got to be a very big deal. On a smaller scale, about a year or so ago, I had a guy come to me saying, "Look, I want to write for your game." I said, "All right, usual thing. Give me 500 words on this topic that we've already covered and published, and your take on it." And he brought in an after-action report on a steampunk tank that was written in proper military style. It was well done. But in the meantime, I'd gone and hit his Facebook profile and found that he was actively posting Nazi propaganda and advocating racial violence and ethnic violence and so forth. And I'm like, okay, I can't have you on my staff. I cannot have an active Nazi on my staff. It's just not going to work. So,
you can't hire anybody that would cost your company money.
Yeah, exactly. Beyond that, I just found the whole thing grossly repugnant. He was advocating violence against my coworkers. At the time, I worked for a company based in India. Most of my coworkers were either Hindu or Muslim. I'm like, dude, that's the people I work with on a daily basis. No, I can't. I'm not even going to associate with you. And I certainly can't have you associated with the company. The damage to our reputation would be huge. So, yeah, there had to be some gatekeeping there to protect the company, and just to get this guy to maybe realize that what he's doing is not going to win him the sort of friends he wants. If he wants friends in the gaming community, he's going to have to change his behaviors. This was an active thing. It wasn't something in his past. It was something he was doing right then.
So what happens when he simply makes it so that wherever you saw this on social media, he hides those things? And then how long until it then looks like it's not there, so it's okay? Like if he hides it in 6 months, you don't see it. So now is it okay, or is it 2 years, 5 years, 10
Speaking of,
years?
speaking as somebody who ran a company, somebody who hides it, it still comes out. We had a guy that was a neo-Nazi, and when I was working at a cable company, and about 6 weeks later, we had to fire him because what he posts online will come out in real life.
Yeah, you first off, you can't just hide it. Somebody's going to see it if you're putting stuff like that out there, if you're doing that kind of thing. Secondly, I would not put I'm not willing to put a time limit on and say, okay, this many months of good behavior is where the cutoff is. I'd have to see some sort of active, what's the term I'm even looking for? Some sort of repentance. I mean, if the guy got his swastika tattoos removed or covered and then went to work for a charity promoting, behavior and belief. Maybe weird. Behavior and belief are interrelated. If the guy still believes these things, he's probably not going to work for a charity promoting interracial harmony.
Right. But then you go into, if you can't hide it, what's to stop somebody going, well, 15 years ago? And then can you even defend using them with the way the climate is politically?
If it was 15 years ago, and over the past 10 years, the guy has been actively raising money for Muslim and Jewish charities and out working in in an adult education center in a heavily minority neighborhood, and generally trying to work off the karma, you got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, if it was a youthful indiscretion or he fell in with the wrong crowd, and it's he's 40 now and he's come around and there's been no evidence of anything like that in 20 years, you can you can burn your sins off, but you have to show it.
Can you these days? I mean,
That's
let's be
what was
honest. When
happening
you look at the
first.
news, it seems like you could have said something 20 years ago and, everybody has to run and flee from you.
Some people demand perfection, and that's unrealistic.
Well, and I actually agree with you guys. I'm just,
And
poking the conversation.
I've gotten up in people's faces about this. Like I said, I'm fairly heavily involved in this, and I've had to get up into some people's faces about this. That look, that was 20 years ago. The person has been doing all this other stuff since then. You either accept that people are not perfect, or I'm going to demand perfection from you, and let's just turn it around and start digging into your past and let you see how it feels. If you won't give anybody else a break, do you deserve one yourself?
Oh, hey, Geberon just pointed out something, and it's very interesting to me, and I think for several of you as well. So what those words and ideas mean in other countries, not just in the US, actually changes things a lot. And the views are very different. Like in FASA, we're working on the Orencia book, which has some bases in French Gallic mythology. And an idea got thrown about for a character who might be relatable to Joan of Arc, which is a big figure for France, right?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, it's kind of a touchy subject because that's being currently is now seen as a right-wing, overly conservative propaganda ideal. I'm not totally sure, but I would have never thought that. But things are things are different. They're perceived differently in other countries. And you don't just have Europe, you have Asia now, because one of you was talking about how gaming is in like Korea, right? So how does this type of thing affect with other countries? How is it perceived in other countries? Anybody?
Yeah.
I'll give you
I mean,
a really strange example. The fez, that's highly offensive in several countries, especially in North Africa. But for everybody else, it's a symbol of Doctor Who.
Yeah, you don't wear a
The
fez
fez
in
hat?
Istanbul. As I recall, they made it illegal.
Talking about the hat, the fez hat. That's
Yes.
Correct.
See,
Yeah, the hat.
I connect it with Shriners in the Shrine Children's Hospital. So
It's
So-
connected
I'm
with
older.
all sorts of, there's imperialist connotations to it in any country touched by the Ottoman Empire.
okay. Because I lived 5 years in Morocco. You know, Fez from Fez, and
right.
it's not like people wear it out in the street a lot, but certainly as part of sort of costuming and things, they seem. I don't remember there being a problem with it, but then Morocco, I think, actually escaped being part of the Ottoman Empire, so perhaps that's why they feel differently about it.
Well,
Apparently, it's a sign of oppression in several countries.
so then in Morocco, where let's say it's commonplace and not perceived that way, if you're writing a book based on Morocco or set in Morocco, is this now offensive to the other countries, or do you have to take it out? What about
Or do you
Go ahead.
lampshade it and bookmark and then call it out? I'm doing a steampunk game. It's set during the British Empire, during the Gilded Age. Colonialism is a huge theme. And so one of the things we've been doing with the game is calling out the negative aspects of colonialism and of empire. A lot of the conflict in the game comes from the fact that the British Empire is expanding into other people's territory, and just taking whatever they want by force. This is causing a lot of problems, a lot of pushback, and we're looking at it from the viewpoint of the people who are being pushed into. So, there's ways you can avoid it, but if you avoid it, you may be erasing the struggles of the people who had to deal with this crap.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is what you do with the thing you're working with, right? So, if you're dealing with colonialism, but looking at it from a realistically anti-colonial point of view, that's different than if you were doing something that was embracing colonialism. I don't think anyone expects if someone were writing a story or a game or doing something in 1930s Germany that you wouldn't have Nazis and other things. But if your game is clearly showing the Nazis as being good guys and say communists as being bad guys, and that's where problems are going to start to arise. And I think that's why you have media like, say, what was that? The movie with the bugs in the 90s, sci-fi
Starship
movie.
Troopers.
Starship Troopers, where if you took it on the level of it being very if you miss the kind of the deeper theme of it being sort of anti all this stuff, it looks like a very sort of fascistic film on one level. And if you perceive it like that, then a lot of things are going to appear, in a bad light. But if you take it on kind of the deeper level of it, sort of critiquing and making fun of that, then it appeals differently to you.
And so, looking at a couple of things that were said. First, when it comes to the purity test, something that people tend to forget is that everything balances out at some point. And right now, luckily, we're in a time where things are moving in the right direction. But it was so bad for so long that the current punch of the social movement goes very far one way. And because we're constantly interconnected, so we have all the social media and everything, it seems that that one little thing take huge proportions. And that is the effect of there was no way to release all that anger, all that energy that people were feeling when they were being persecuted, right? Or persecuted. So now it's coming out, it's coming back the other way pretty strongly, but give it a few more years and I have no doubt it will balance out. Right now, the social medias are just a few years old. it's such a brand new tool that maybe people don't know how to use it properly. And things will stay in the ether, things will stay on internet, and people will be judged a lot more easily in the future that we were when there was no internet, because things were concealed. But at the same time, it means that behaviors will mean something, when before, when it could be forgotten, it didn't mean anything just quite as much as it does now. So it will create a different atmosphere. Maybe people will feel a little bit more observed, but at the same time, some behavior that were unacceptable before but unpursuable because not verifiable, now it looks like it's gonna kind of balance itself out, and people will not allow themselves to do things that would hurt people simply because there's now a trail, right? And when it comes to what you were saying about, but if I do something in one country, it can be interpreted badly in another country or offensive in another country. Now everything travels very fast, so there will be two things that anybody publishing anything will have to do. One is checking before doing a market entry in any country. So if somebody publishes a book and doesn't spend $50 on any online service, like I know I use Upwork a lot, but if you want to go into Morocco, for example, and you don't spend those $50 to get somebody to review everything, to make sure that it's not offensive, then it's your problem. If somebody buys a book that was not released in a certain country but goes to a different country to buy that book, then they cannot complain about it, because it didn't go through the steps of being verified before making a market entry. So the responsibility is definitely on who gets the book where, or who publishes the book where. And
also,
it is
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, well, it's just a conclusion. It is the responsibility of the publisher when they take steps forward and outward.
You also have to watch out, though, for where you're printing it, because there was that deal just recently where a book was printed in China and the entire print run was seized by the state censor and burned, because it talked about, as I recall, it talked about Hong Kong and Singapore. Didn't necessarily leave the... I'm sorry?
The gentleman that wrote it clarified it. He said the biggest problem was it referred to Taiwan as an independent nation.
And so, the state censor seized the entire print run and incinerated the books. So,
I mean, I live right next to China,
and Taiwan or Tibet and get published in China.
It is a different beast. When you want to enter China, everybody knows. So it is known around the world as censorship, but when you do business in China, you call it code of conduct or guidelines, right? So anything you do with China, you have to understand the beast. It's a completely different way of behaving and understanding the relationship between you, the state, and the audience.
And sadly, there's a lot of publishing groups that if you use certain types of people as the bad guy, they will go after you, or they won't publish the book. There was one where the guy had a homosexual as the villain, and that was not allowed.
So was this the end, or you breaking off?
Oh no, I was trying to find it. It was like the Hugo Awards made a big deal about it about 2 years ago, and that's
was that the thing that
being a writer?
Was that the thing that Vox put in, or was that something else?
I don't think it was Vox, but it was just somebody that had the villain happen to be gay. I mean, they're giving grief right now to the Dune movie, certain groups, because Baron Harkonnen, they said that, he's gay. It's like, if you read Dune and the only thing you've got against Baron Harkonnen that he's gay, you're not reading that much into the character.
Read the book at all. Like, there's a whole lot more to why
there's a whole lot of this other stuff. That's really incidental. On the other hand, there are people out there who will hit you if you provide any sort of positive presentation. I keep waiting for somebody to blow up at me for the trans character in the London source book. And the only thing I can figure is that it just hasn't gotten wide enough marketing yet. Because sooner or later, there's going to be somebody out there who is going to be like, "Oh my God, how dare you put this sort of character in your book? Violates my beliefs, yada yada." Dude, there were trans people in London in the 1880s. Just deal. This is reality. All right, we're getting poked here.
There's a good point there. Sorry, there's so many vowels. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Who says the problem I see is the entire construct of purity taste is that the moral codes, they are based on shift. And I don't see that as a problem. It's actually the complete opposite. Because look at what happened with the director for Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Disney find out that there's this suite that came out, got fired, and then just a few months later got hired again. It's especially because it shifts so fast that there's a lot more people worrying about those purity tests than the actual impact that they have, I believe.
Also,
it goes so fast that it
and-
moves on.
Well, but I think that there's a very good point with how it's viewed in that it does change. So if you look at Alexander the Great, well, at the time, he was actually very progressive because he didn't force people to change to his religion. Otherwise, but keep in mind, it is a time where he's a conqueror, and conquerors do bad things in that time period, right? But he was progressive in the fact that he didn't force people to take his religion. If you look at how people want to him nowadays, just this horrible monster, and it's like, you're trying to view him with a modern perspective on an ancient history figure and completely taking him out of the context. It's kind of like, I didn't know that fezzes could be seen as apparently offensive in some countries. Because in the US, you're either a Shriner or you're into Doctor Who, right? Like, something offensive about this. But we can't always know. And with them shifting as much and as quickly as you said, you never seem to know where your targets are going to be. So I think that it is problematic.
It's always going to be a moving target. It's always been a moving target. The best I think we can do is to try and produce materials that are sensitive to the issues that we're aware of, and just generally, follow Will Wheaton's rule. Don't be a dick.
Yeah, that's the answer to pretty much everything when it comes to PR, in my opinion. Don't be a bad person, and you'll be okay.
All right, I think it's time to move on, isn't it? Andrew, is it your turn to pick the topic?
I'm not sure about that.
I think you were third. I'll go back and look real quick. Okay, let's see.
It's Todd's turn, says Pex.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Thank you. Thank you, Pex.
Let's see. How about NPCs building relationships beyond single-use advantage gained?
Oh, mine. Yay.
I'll take that one for 500, Alex.
Okay. I have to say, I didn't actually come up with this. Paul Chege came up with this about a week ago, and I've been thinking about it a lot since then. I ended up writing a whole blog entry on it. He was griping that this was something that really irritated him about role gaming in general, that NPC relationships were seen as something you built that you could burn to give yourself a one-shot advantage. I have a real problem with that. If you're building a relationship with an NPC, there should be a give and take. If we're trying to model reality even vaguely, you don't. This is not video games. You don't set a flag on an NPC so that you can then burn it later in an encounter. Earth Dawn, going all the way back to first edition, had a whole thing about favors and NPC attitudes. In 1879 has built on top of that and has a social conflict mechanic. So we've actually mechanically addressed this, as well as trying to get into the game world and into player behavior. If you build a connection with an NPC, you don't want to burn that for a one-off. That was way too expensive and took too much effort and maintenance. So yeah, that's something that I thought Paul had a real good idea, a real good point in calling out that sort of behavior. You don't burn connections with people you know in real life. Why would you do it in a game?
I think it might be because in some games NPCs don't recur. So if you're only going to meet this Duke once, then why not just go and blow it all for one big thing? But I think the point is then have them recur, have these people show up in other places. I think the other thing is don't have them just give the farm away because a player asks for it. Have them pay a price for it and pay that price up front. Obviously, it makes great adventure hooks if the PC's dead set on getting something and he needs his Duke to give it to him, then have the Duke demand, fealty or service from that player character and have them demand it up front. You'll get this thing you want after you do all this stuff for me, not beforehand.
What about you, Aurelius?
Plus, players love.
Oh, sorry.
I was saying, plus players love reoccurring NPCs, especially you walk into the bar and everybody knows your name.
I'm trying to really grasp the meaning of this, and I'm struggling with it right now. The idea is that you build the NPC and then
I think it's more that the players will essentially use an NPC to get one big thing off of them and then throw it away, as opposed to being something that they see a connection that, as was mentioned before, that they're nurturing and they're trying to maintain and use up. So it's kind of like you blow your wad on one big request and then you kind of burn that NPC, sort of exchange the NPC for one big thing and then you go about your way forgetting about that NPC ever existed, sort of thing. I think that's my sense of it.
Okay, it wouldn't be the DM's responsibility to say, no, this doesn't make sense, or this seems a little bit far-fetched. Because what I'm hearing here is there's a situation ages ago on the show Critical Role, where one of the character decided suddenly there was a big fight coming to write a letter to his father or something to send an army. And the first reaction of the DM was, well, no, that's not going to happen. So, it seems like the DM's responsibility to say, well, no, that's not going to happen. That you can't just have that NPC show up, get a big reward, and then that's it.
I mean, that's definitely one way you could have it, is just them saying no. Or like I said, you can have them sort of exact prices for things to, and so those prices, I think, don't have to be one time either. So in other words, if you want something from a prince, you need to swear an oath and, be the prince's man. And therefore you're on the hook for doing stuff for that prince for the rest of your career, potentially, if things don't change. It doesn't have to be a one-time fee, so to speak.
Well, and I think that Aurelia is pointing out, I feel, something along the lines of it has to do with what type of play style the table has. If you're very story driven, then it wouldn't make sense to, hi, I just met you, please give me your farm, right? Or even, hi, I just met you, give me your farm. No, you have to rescue a cat from the tree and then I'll give you the farm. Versus a much more story oriented where it'd be like, why would he even take that up? Why would you do that? And so I think that play style, the type of game and the play style come hugely into play on that.
Well, I think also, though, that it doesn't have to be that you're getting something for nothing. But I think it can be
Right.
like, you save the kingdom, so now I'm just going to blow that. I'm going to blow that big thing on one thing, and then I'm kind of forget the kingdom's old news, whatever the king's old news, goodbye. And yeah, I think ultimately it is up to the GMs to uphold what
Curtail.
they feel like, to curtail that. If they don't feel like that's realistic, or whatever it is, then they need to say no but or yes but or whatever it is, and kind of continue on that negotiation of, okay, you want this keep or castle or dragon or Pegasus or whatever it is, like, here's the things you're gonna have to do that.
So we're going to Test of the Warlords, that module, where you get handed a castle and say, now make it work.
Absolutely. I really like that module.
Yeah, I did a review on that one a while back.
Though I haven't actually played it. I've only read it. It seemed pretty cool. I think, is that the one where the giants invade? At some point you get this kind of invasion of giants?
It can happen. I mean, it's more of a campaign than an actual module, which makes it so unique. But it does have, you have to establish, you can't just move on. You're stuck to one area. So making the NPCs would flesh out your area. If you know who, the town master is that lives next to you, or even if, you go in and the washerwoman remembers your name. That makes the game organic rather than just reading names off a piece of paper.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a benefit for sticking around in one area. If you're always moving to the new area, to the new spot, then a lot of the NPCs you leave behind are going to feel disposable, because they kind of are. If you're passing across the entire breadth of the continent, the people on the West Coast, as you're moving eastward, you're never going to see them again, most likely. So get the best thing you can before you move on. And if that's the way your game is, then your players are just going to try to optimize and maximize their returns from their NPC dealings. But if you're somewhere where these guys are going to keep showing up, then it's more worth their while to stay in the good graces of these different people.
I think we actually had a campaign where the paladin ended up marrying the barmaid, and he was some noble because he kept going back, and it just became part of the campaign. And that's memorable rather than just bed them and forget them.
There was a discussion, I think it was one of the other podcasts on here, about, because I throw out NPCs, all GMs do, we throw out an NPC, and sometimes we're utterly shocked over which ones players latch on to and are more interested in, right? So you find that the ones that they're more interested in, they purposely try to get to know, deal with more things like that. They're less likely to say throw away. One of the people I had mentioned, there was a system that allowed players to suggest NPCs, basically. It was kind of a I got a guy type of thing, which gave an automatic investment to that NPC, and again would probably make them more likely to not use it and throw out the NPC. So I think that's another possibility. Maybe. To try to keep them connected.
Yeah, I like that concept. I think I've seen it for sure and kind of played by the Apocalypse games, and stuff that I've been trying to work into my game is that part of character creation. Pick, a contact that you have somewhere, and that you can flesh them out sort of when you need them. And then, it's kind of like that. I have a guy. And you're right. If it's somebody that and it's something you spent your resource on, you're not going to want to burn it unless it's really important. And that becomes an interesting decision of, we need something, we can do it one way, or do I burn this contact and lose them to get this? And then it makes it a meaningful decision.
Yes.
The GDW games did that, especially Twilight 2000, where you come across a enemy garrison and you actually happen to know the other guy because you served with him.
Also,
I do like the idea.
It sounds a little bit like the Pillars of Sanity in Cthulhu as well. No.
But yeah, by getting the players to help flesh out, create the NPCs, it creates an automatic connection, which is really what recurring has to do. It's making them more connected to said NPC so that they don't feel like it's a wrench that they can use and then discard.
And if you have a maintenance cost or a maintenance effort, then that gets involved as well, because you build the connection in the player's mind. The player becomes invested in the relationship. One of the things that we've pointed out mechanically for a late 1800s society is that there are social obligations. If you have a connection with an NPC, you're going to get invited to social events. And if you don't show up, you'd better have a darn good reason. You don't stand up your friends when they invite you to dinner or, to a formal ball or, down to the pub to celebrate their kid's birthday or whatever. And then there's favors coming back the other way. If you've got a relationship with an NPC to the point where you could ask them for a favor and they would deliver it, that works both ways. That NPC may come to you and say, hey, I need a favor. Blow that off and you just burn the connection.
Well, and I like the idea that you have to put something back into the connection on a somewhat regular basis. I had this army buddy. I haven't been in the military for 15 years, but I'm totally going to call him up and ask him to crash a plane into something or possibly get shot at as we're going to jump out of the plane or whatever it's going to be. Why would the army buddy do that if you haven't talked to him in 15 years? Where is the connection? Where's the time to make that connection?
I think another thing that helps is, don't make your NPCs dicks and don't make them pushovers. I've played in games where like every NPC in the town was just a jerk. And it was just like, man, is everybody here have a bad attitude? Is there anybody here who's nice? And I think sometimes we can, as GMs, sometimes we get caught up in we don't think we're doing it, or but we are. We're playing them all kind of the same guy, and they're all just gruff and mean and don't want to give an inch.
Everybody played too much Diablo. Do you remember the town in Diablo where, oh, go do this thing. Is anyone going to help me? No. Are you going to give me a discount? No. Go do that thing though. Like.
And on the other
Diablo,
hand,
you're just
right. Sorry. But that shouldn't be how it's done at the table. And I'm agreeing. But yes, it shouldn't be.
And then don't be pushovers either. Don't just give. I see sometimes on Reddit people ask questions like, they did this thing and now they own this town, and you ask, well, how did that happen? It's like, well, they asked for it and they gave it to them. It's like, why did they do that? So you got to find that.
You always need to have one NPC in a town that can wipe the party just to keep them honest.
Aurelian, were you going to say something? I thought I saw you pop up.
No. Actually, I was just listening. To me, I said everything I thought about this. Is really in the hands of the GM for me, because maybe I haven't had the opportunity to GM long campaigns. Basically, this is all what I'm saying. So when it comes down to short adventures or one shots or anything like this, the chances of NPCs popping back up is really small. So it's really hard for me to give.
That's a good point. NPCs matter a lot more in my decade-long campaign than they do at a one-shot con game.
Yeah.
And they're actually, I think, somewhat easier in the one-shot con game because they're going to have that interaction, maybe a couple of other interactions. And so you could kind of pre-think out most of what that NPC is supposed to do. But in 10 years, well, characters grow and change, and so should the NPC. So they get more complex to run, especially since the GM has to run all of them. Are we ready to move to the next topic, guys?
I think so. For it.
Is Andrew next or
X says yes.
Affirmative.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Let's just go with the one on top there. Current rise of role-playing and especially D&D around the world and especially Korea. We have someone who is in Korea, I believe, who can give us the lead in on that. Let's get the on-site expert opinion first.
Yes.
Yeah, I think when I thought about that topic, I got a little bit too specific when I mentioned Korea. But yeah, it could be a good place to start in because Korea has this very special thing that if there's something they like, it's going to explode in no time. And Dungeons and Dragons is actually starting to come on the front side of the scene. Wizard of the Coast put all of their effort on Magic the Gathering here because the education doesn't give a lot of leeway to make people creative and outspoken about their creativity in a group such as what we do when we play D&D. So it's really difficult. It's a style of education that creates a bunch of introverts in general. But now the people are changing a lot, and Wizard of the Coast is slowly catching up. So we should have a Korean version of the book coming out soon. But the way it started was there was absolutely zero content, and the people who wanted to play it had to go overseas, buy a book, come back, and basically just translate it by hand. That was like 30 years ago. So they translate everything by hand, and then they pass on the book that they translated to each other. So it started with absolutely nothing, and now the big guns are coming in, and it's changing everything. But I have a feeling it's like this around the world. When I first started playing, we didn't have this thing, because I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, if you said that you played Dungeons Dragons, people thought you were weird." I didn't have this thing because where I started playing, we just played it because we wanted to be between friends and have fun and play a game. So there was no feeling of shame, if you want to call it that way, attached to it. But now it's just becoming really cool to play Dungeons Dragons because there's a lot of shows and podcasts and everything that promote it really well and that show how fun it is. And it seems to be changing a lot. And I don't know if it has an impact on all of you, if it changes the kind of people that actually come and want to play at conventions, at tables that you might be running or might be a part of. Here, there's a huge diversity of people now. I sometimes play with friends who are teaching at the university, and even university students who don't seem like the type to play Dungeons and Dragons come up and say, "Hey, where can we learn Dungeons and Dragons?" So, does it have any impact for you?
Oh, we're in the middle of a renaissance right now. I mean, we're actually, back in my day, we all had to play in the, Adrian's garage with the door shut. And then yesterday, I'm at a theater, a theater festival, and I had one of the actors found out that I was how much of a gamer I was. He actually came up and asked me for pointers in the middle of a crowd. That's not exactly something I've ever had happen before.
Yeah, I've seen some rise in interest in a number of places, and not in others. Malaysia seems to have a rising role gaming community. I've seen some efforts for translation and distribution going on there. At the same time, for 4 years, I had to explain to my Indian coworkers this weird thing that I did on the weekend. They'd never heard of anything like it. Okay, yeah, different cultures, different things. Just not a thing there at this point. Of course, trying to get into the Indian market is a nightmare just from the linguistic standpoint. Whatever language you pick for your first publication, you're going to cheese off some people. It doesn't matter what language you pick. There's so many that people are actively using.
Just go with Esperanto.
No. Oh, geez. Only if I want people coming after me, with torches and pitchforks. Holy Toledo. I'd probably go with Hindi, simply because it's the dominant language of government. But if I'd wanted to sell in the South, I'd go with Tamil or Telugu. And for going to the west of the country, I'd want to go with Kannada. So yeah, it gets just hideously complicated. I begin to wonder if maybe how much the translation barrier is having to do with introduction of gaming to another country besides the English speaking U.S. and Europe. Andy, can you talk about Earth Dawn and its introduction in Poland and how that's going?
Well, I will say, quite frankly, Earth Dawn is very, very much probably even more active in Europe. And Germany has a lot of very interested in Earth Dawn. Poland does, and they're actually becoming more. I think we're also seeing movement in South America towards that. And Andrew, correct me, wasn't there interest in 1879 in South America? There was talk about getting it translated?
Yes, in Brazil, getting it translated into Portuguese.
So, and I think that part of what makes Earth Dawn very interesting for other parts of the country, especially in Europe, or other parts of the world, not country, Europe especially, is that the original setting, Barsave, is actually in that area. A little more towards Russia, Ukraine, but it's in that kind of area. Whereas you see that most games, American-built games, are all strictly fantasy and don't have a connection to a real-world geography, or a lot of them are based, like, I love Deadlands. Deadlands is based in the American, Wild West or post-apocalypse, but still the main part is located in the U.S. Shadowrun was located in the U.S., really. So you don't see as many games that either connect geographically. Yeah, I'll call that a word today.
Geographically.
Thank you. That is the word. Someone's on muscle relaxers, and that would be me. So words are hard.
Very problem.
So you don't see that tie, and I think a lot of countries want to see that tie. But then Aurelian brought up a good point that if you are going to tie it to a country, a culture, even somewhat. So like Earth Dawn is, yes, fantasy, but yes, sort of based on real geography, culture. You have to be very careful about how you do that. But I think that these other countries are looking for that. They want to be brought in and showcased and go, hey, but this is kind of about us.
Now, that being said,
the setting that I'm working on, the setting I'm working on, for whatever reason, is insanely popular with the Italians because several of the nations are based on Italy or loosely based on Italy. And I've been told by the people that have been helping me with it, if I don't translate this into Italian, the Italians are going to come and get me and force me.
Well, that's a good place to be.
There's just going to be a knock on the door, and it's going to be the Italian prime minister with a bunch of guys and a dictionary.
Aurelian, do you see that too, where the other countries are looking for tabletop RPGs that connect somewhat to their areas, regions?
I think the countries that would be vocal about wanting this to happen already have translations, and in that sense, I think about Japan. And I can only talk about Asia because that's where I've been for the past decade. So I wouldn't know. Like, for example, somebody was talking about Joan of Arc before and how people were offended about it being used in a game in certain ways. Even that I wouldn't know because I don't really care about Joan of Arc, even though I'm French. So based in Asia, I think all those who are just discovering tabletops and RPGs now, the new markets, such as I think right now the key new markets are Singapore, the Philippines, and I think Vietnam has a very active group, and Malaysia is quite getting more and more active because it's not about culture or identity yet. It's just about the game and just learning to not only run it, but also run it in an organized way that bring in several, like creating conventions, basically, is what I'm trying to say. They're not vocal yet about wanting a setting that looks like what they know, simply because it's not their culture. It's just a new product that is coming in. It'll probably come down. It will come at some point, or if it does come out that there's a setting made especially for this area, people will be happy to welcome it. If anything, that what I just did sounds clear enough and makes sense.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, I got it.
As Mage is saying here in the chat, everybody should have the chance to have a DM throw dice at them, or GM as the case may be. Getting the games into other languages can be difficult. Getting the Schwarzauge brought over to America required a massive effort to translate it into English and get it printed and published and distributed. It's been a mainstay of German gaming for many years, but it's only recently that native English speakers have even been able to get access to it. Getting systems that were originally written in Portuguese brought from Brazil to an English-speaking country can be a challenge. I cited Shadows of Esterin earlier. You've got this whole challenge, and a lot of it is economic and some of it's legal, because you have to worry about who's doing the translation, where they're located, where is the printing being done, who's handling the distribution. With the Brazilian connection for 1879 that Andy brought up earlier, we waited until we got contacted by a Brazilian company. They agreed to do the translation, to print the Portuguese version, and to distribute for Brazil, simply because we don't have the resources to be able to set all that up from scratch ourselves. We have to have a partner there who already has the capability to do this. So, while we want to get these games moving and get them brought across into other languages, brought across international boundaries and so forth, there's a lot of challenges to it.
Well, and that kind of ties back into the one Chinese company that didn't like the book and they destroyed the books, right? So somebody mentioned somewhere that, that's what you get for using a Chinese printer, which I'm not going to knock that. But a lot of companies have to use a Chinese printer because it's more cost effective. When you start talking about translating to other countries and finding people from those countries to read to make sure that something's not culturally inappropriate or something, well, if you have to pay $50 a country, that's not that bad until you start looking at 20, 30 countries. And then it starts getting expensive. And a lot of the companies are just too small to tackle the price ranges for that type of thing. Paying for translators, paying to have it reviewed for other countries, for every country, every region, is a lot for a lot of the smaller companies.
So in this case, I highly, highly disagree with that, and I think that could make for an interesting conversation. Is as soon as you start, no matter the size, as soon as you start market entry, which is why you would advertise or try to attract people from a certain country, then you make it your responsibility to double check the book. It's not the same as having a book widely available and people come and find it on your ground, right? I'm not saying that, but once you start the translation, then you do have to. I really believe you have to check for.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm saying is that a lot of countries don't translate to other languages because of the cost.
Right. And in this case, well, unfortunately,
I'm not saying that you shouldn't do
the way it is.
research when you do stuff, but what I'm saying is that most companies aren't doing it because it's so expensive to translate, have someone look it over, and then reprint in another language and market in other countries, which is why, and I think we should, and I'd like it to be more cost effective to be able to do so.
It is tricky to go.
It's
all
just
around.
cost market analysis.
And coming back to the Chinese factory, it's actually now it's becoming cost effective to print in other non government control countries. Like now, Vietnam is becoming is really rising in terms of effectiveness and distribution. Korea is very good as well. So China it seems cost effective to everyone simply because it's the one that is known, right? It's the one that is set up for everybody. But now there's a lot of other options.
Well, FOSSA prints in the U.S., but we made decisions and choices about that as a company. And Andrew will agree or disagree, but I like the fact that we're printing here in the States. But we're mostly here in the States, so it makes sense, I think, for us. Not that Vietnam and other countries are not perfectly good places to print too, but...
Yeah, I don't have a problem with our printing here in the U.S. If not, what I have a problem with is people who tell me you should use local printers and then gripe about what it costs to do so. Now, if you want us to use a local printer, you have to be willing to pony up the bucks for us to be able to do that.
Okay. I think we have one topic left, or did we have something else on this one?
No, I'm pretty much done. I think there's one left.
I'll just ask one question to everybody who's publishing. Do you feel that now there's markets that are actually saturated, like countries that are saturated with content?
Market saturation is a very big deal in the U.S. It's gotten to be a very tight and competitive market here.
There's only so many dollars to go around.
There's only so many dollars, and there are so many Kickstarters. Somebody said something like there's like 400 U.S. products, gaming products, tabletop gaming products a month, brand new, something like 400. It's a lot. There's a wide variety. There's a lot of really great things out there, but it becomes very hard to find those great things with so much out there. I don't know that other countries have that problem. But it has nothing to do with 3.0 or otherwise. I mean, some of these games have their very own game systems and things like that. There's just so much coming out all the time. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just meaning it when 3.0 came out, there was just this massive glut.
I'm not going to totally disagree with that, but yeah. But there's just so much that it's hard to get noticed. It's hard to... I think the U.S. is kind of saturated. And I think it makes it very hard for the little guys who may have really wonderful products to get the attention that they deserve.
Fair enough. Okay, I think we can move on to the next topic. Randomness is a GM's friend.
Yeah, I learned that in the last campaign we ran. I mean, I don't know what he means completely by randomness, but like in all the latest oh God, I'm dating myself. Wizards products. Everything is a cookie. All the monsters are cookie cutters, so the players quickly memorize how many hit points they have, how much armor they have, how much damage they do, and it's hard to not metagame when you can guess what you have to roll or what you have to do to take it down.
Yeah, this was my topic, and I was referring a lot to just random generators, using random ways of content, or if it's random hit dice or random tables or random encounters, all those kind of things that I think I guess depending on maybe what school of gaming you come from, are either looked at as a waste of time and things that just slow down, get in the way of the story or campaign, or like I like to use them as real features to kind of push things forward and keep things fresh. And like you were saying, keep players on their feet because they can't predict exactly what's going to happen or what's going to come. And same for the GM, which I always find useful, that I don't know exactly what's going to happen. So that keeps me on my toes.
I actually was just talking about random generators on Twitter like 5 days ago, something like that. And the thing is that for me, when I GM, there are moments where my brain just goes, yeah, there's a guy there. His name is, and in those cases, I do love random generators. I love the ability to, my brain is stupid at the moment. I'm going to click a button and, oh, his name is George and he's 6'1" and he has red hair and a black beard, whatever. Okay. And nowadays we have a lot of different options with generators. It's not just names or treasure. There's personality trait or appearance things or stats that will come up with some of these. There's a guy who was telling me about one called Wizard Dawn, Wizardawn. And it has a bunch of different generators, names, races, pubs, things. And I think that they can be very helpful when your creativity is slacking a bit. Now, I
making a cheat sheet.
But that's it. Sometimes you just sit there. I used to just sit there and look at a generator and go click. Yeah, I like that name. I put it on a piece of paper. Yep. Don't like that name. Next. And get a list of 10, 15 names that I can just pull out my piece of paper and check mark. But I still use the generator to come up with the 10, 15 names. There's also a lot of books that do that. Cheat sheets. But there's a lot of books. There's a lot of PDFs out there that you can print that have cheat sheets. Personally, I like them as a tool. I don't care for dice generators, though. They're not truly random, but real dice aren't necessarily totally random either because flaws and stuff like that. But yeah. But I do, and I like them, and I think it's great when GMs get together and share those ideas of different ones because you may know one that I haven't heard of yet that's fabulous. I think that that's always good.
Of course, the danger is always they ask who the random. I was going to say the danger is always to have the party walk into the bar and there's the quest giver, and off to the side they see some guy, John Doe Smith, and they decide that they're more interested in him.
I think that tends to happen anyway, regardless of whether that person's randomly generated or part of the scene setting.
I think the trick with randomness is that since you always have to keep your character's level in mind, there's a limit to the randomness of the encounters themselves. Like it's hard to really make a really tough fight for a second level character. You'll have to always have easy characters and then slowly ramp them up. So true randomness is a little bit difficult, I feel.
More like the original random encounter type generators had, whichever level of the dungeon you were on had different range of enemies. So as a player, you could kind of plan for that, right? If you wanted to be bold and go down into a deep level of the dungeon, you would get better rewards, but you'd also know that by going down in that deeper level of the dungeons, you were apt to run into things that might be too tough for you to handle. Or you could try to, go to a higher level of the dungeon that maybe is a little bit easier for you, or try to find that spot. So you weren't pulling from one table for the entire experience. They'd have different tables that would kind of not be for each level, but say for ranges of levels that was keyed into basically how far into the dangerous places were you going.
I mean, first edition D&D had an entire dungeon generation chart, I think, in the DMG, and you could just play you could create an entire dungeon just by rolling randomly on charts.
5th edition still has a version of that, actually. I find it pretty neat. You could actually come up with some interesting things. I would probably use one as a base and then flesh it out more. But they actually work fairly well for coming up with some just designs if you're on the hook. But now, of course, with the web and the ease of being able to go to places like Donjon or some of those other spots where they can do all that work for you, essentially, the charts and tables in the back of those books don't aren't quite as necessary as they used to be, pre-internet computer, mobile device age.
On a more micro level, one of my favorite tools in GMing is a 30-sided die that is numbered 1 through 10, negative, neutral, and positive. And using it to generate the initial attitude of a stray NPC. You just met this guy. Instead of having the Diablo town of douchebags, roll the 30-sider and see what kind of mood this person is in. Comes up a positive 5. Oh, hey, he's happy to see you in his store. Might be able to make a few coins off of you. If the players use social skills or talents to try and adjust the guy's attitude, fine, I'll let them. But if they're just talking with him and not putting effort into it, that 30-sider comes in so handy to shift the NPC's attitude as they talk with the person. And rather than trying to figure out what's this guy's motive and, what does he actually want? This is a random NPC that I didn't expect to have to use to begin with, didn't prep anything for. The party walked into a store with that kind of on a random whim. That 30-sider has saved my bacon so many times.
Is that a custom die, or what game does that? What game comes with that kind of 30-sided die?
It was a custom die that I picked up a long time ago. I was still running D&D Second Edition. Went into a game store and they had these dice. And I'm looking at this thing, going, "What in the hell is that?" Oh, I can see
D30 dice. D30 dice goes with all of the D30 random sheets. Yes, those are awesome. Everybody should own
this
those.
one's not just 1 to 30; it's 1 to 10, positive, negative, neutral. So it's formatted a bit differently than, say, the DCC 30 die.
Yeah, it's not it's not a 1 to 30 die. It's numbered -1 to -10, +1 to +10, and 1 to 10 with no modifier sign.
Okay, now that is wicked cool. I need that. I don't have that.
I found it 30 years ago, give or take. Walked into a game store and was looking at just what they had, and there was this weird die, and I'm like, I can see uses for this. I have to have one of these. The first time I used it, I rolled it in front, out from behind the screen, and just rolled it out onto the table. And one of the players actually jumped up out of their seat and took a step back and said, "What the hell is that?"
That's awesome.
They had never seen anything like it. I'm like, oh.
Well, and I actually collect a lot of random dice. Like I have a weather dice, I have an alignment dice, I have race dice, I have dungeon dice, I actually have these little 6-siders that are emoji dice. And so I keep it all together it's basically set up to be a con game. And I have a random trap dice and everything. I have all these dice. Everybody's chaotic neutral. You get an emotion dice, and that determines how you feel about things. And so, like, it's going to be a dungeon crawl. You roll the dungeon dice. That's the dungeon, But it's a fun side game type of thing. But yes, I love all the random dice. And they have a random dice for pretty much everything. Race, alignment, traps, weather.
Has anybody here seen Rory's Story Cubes?
Oh, I have all the sets. I love those for inspiration. If you get stuck in the middle of a story, roll a few cubes and then it kickstart the machine again.
Oh, they're brilliant. I have used them to generate so many NPCs for books I was working on. Where, grab a handful of dice of the story cubes and you roll them, and then just group them in threes and go, okay, this set of three is an NPC, this set of three is an NPC. Now, who are these people? What are they about? That level of randomness and the input from it is just so incredibly useful. What in the heck is that? Drinking game dice? D14 drinking game die. Explain this thing.
Basically, each side, it's
don't know what it is.
very, very old dice, actually. And each side, it tells you to make take an action. So it comes with a blog. Is a gamer, actually, who writes a bunch of really cool books. And he wrote about this dice, and what it does is, one is dance to no music or singing, or one is drink and sing straight, or there's a bunch of indication on its face, and depending on what you fall on, then you have to follow the instruction. Pretty much what it is. So you have all the facets explained on the blog post. It's a really cool looking dice too. I like it.
Oh, good grief. Yeah, I'm reading through the blog on this, and this thing looks like it could be just... This looks like something that would be great to drop on a player group when they're in a pub and just sort of farting around, and you want to cause them some problems or issues. You could do all sorts of things with that. Oh my gosh.
The second one is nice. Your nose will get smacked by a bunch of people. You don't want to fall on that.
You know, you've walked into this tough bar and you've ordered beers, and the guy next to you at the bar puts this die in front of one of the characters and says, "You just bought, roll."
Yeah. Good.
Oh,
Good
I got to get me one of those.
They're really hard to come by, actually. I don't think they manufacture them anymore.
Oh, that would be sad. Somebody needs to make something like this.
Well, you got your build your own paper version in the blog post. There you go.
Yeah. Okay, product and service promotion time. Last goes first on this one, as I recall. We do the product again? Promotion in inverse of the marching order. Pax, what's our marching order?
All right. So yeah, right now I'm finishing up a campaign setting for 5e. I know we've complained that there's so many games on Kickstarters not that long ago, but I will do a Kickstarter starting around the 15th of this month. So it's a 5e setting based on Korean lore and culture, and it's called the Koryo Hall of Adventure. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I think it says it all.
Okay. 1879 is my product line. It's a steampunk system, uses the same mechanic as Earth Dawn, and takes place essentially in the same world, kind of the way Earth Dawn and Shadowrun used to have the tie to each other. You can, in fact, play 1879 as steampunk Shadowrun, but you can run it as a lot of other genres. You can do court intrigue, military adventure, lost world exploration. There is a wormhole in Greenwich Park that leads to a higher magic world, and yes, there are dinosaurs. The players and GM's companions for 1879 are in production. The player's companion is in layout. GM's companion is having the last of the vehicle combat rules hashed out, and we'll be going to layout very shortly. There's some adventures going on. I'm also doing a Patreon where I'm developing a new mechanic and integrated game world and doing the development in public. The patrons are actually part of the development team and get consulted as to how are we going to work out this dice mechanic. What are we going to do with this part of the game world and so forth. It's very much an in-public thing. And, oh yes, that FASA. That FASA. Got to make the joke there. And let's brace for link spamage here, because I'm going to drop a whole bunch of links in here. That'll give you our website and our store and our social media presence and all sorts of good stuff. And then
Andrew's
I'm going to
a lot better at this than me.
Yeah, I just had that queued up already, having done a few of these before. I've got the text file sitting around ready to be copied and pasted. Okay, passing the talking stick to the next person.
All right, I'm Todd at HexPress. I'll post a link to my YouTube channel, which I'm concentrating on putting a lot of video content up these days, at least at the moment. I just actually posted a video up this morning on building better puzzle rooms. So I'll link to that, and I'm done.
Oh, it's me. Okay. Andrew did all the work. So there you go.
No, you get to talk about Earth Dawn.
I do get to talk. Earth Dawn's great. We are just finishing up Elven Nations. We've got several books in development. Really hoping to have some big news coming out soon about the Paths book, which gives players more options for their characters. It's a great universe. It's high magic with horror, and well, the horrors are called horrors, bad things, and it's a fabulous world. My favorite part about Earth Dawn is that objects and things can grow with your character, which is something that I've always loved and will continue to love. I love our system because you get to touch multiple dice, and the more dice I get to play with, the happier I am. So it's really great. You're welcome to go to any of our social medias, get in touch with anybody on the team, get in touch with me, ask questions, go to the shop, buy our stuff. We like that a lot. There you go. Like I said, Andrew's better at this part than me. I'm done.
I don't actually have anything to sell. I'm was working on something that for the DM's Guild that I'm not allowed to post up yet. I'm translated the entire Mystara setting to 5th edition. I'll post a link up to the video channel where I talk about that a lot, and the Twitter. I'm just I kind of wrote this after Harvey because I write better angry, and unfortunately, most of the stuff I write is non-gaming related, and I don't think anybody here wants to hear about the Houston, Texas theater scene or the historical parts of it.
Historical got my attention.
Houston hates its own history. We've wiped out our own archives twice. Once by storm, once by incompetence. They got full in 1972, so they just threw them away. Yeah, so I wrote about a lot of Houston history and things that people didn't know about, like race riots or somebody burned down the city once on accident. Then we had somebody destroy the entire downtown because they built a dam wrong.
Yeah, definitely post a link to the blog on that. I want to read through it.
Let me find Houston history. And it was, my city likes to just destroy any old building. And then we started writing about crime. And the editor got nervous because we were writing about the first time a man has ever been charged by murdering his wife by treating her for the wrong illness. And then that whole story went sideways because they tried him 3 times. They couldn't prove it. He gets murdered by a hitman. The hitman gets killed by the cops. And nobody knows who hired the hitman. Actually, everybody knows who hired the hitman. It was her father, but nobody can prove it because he was standing in a room while the father was getting murdered with 1,000 people.
Jeez. so much source material, you know? One of the things I love about doing an alt history game is that there's so much stuff already there that you can just pull in and people are like, oh, come on, you got to be kidding. No, that really happened.
All right, now we will unmute the audience for live Q&A. And if you don't have a mic, type it in chat, maybe bold it or something so it stands out, and we will call on you. Or read your question aloud. Or just use your mic. And everybody should be unmuted. So with the Patreon project, Andrew, how far along are you and your public development team?
We have got the basic structure for the characters down. We've got some basic stuff about the game world. We've got an example party put together and are sort of building from the type of characters and type of stories that we want to tell to create the mechanics from there. Right now, we're going over the actual dice mechanics and how the rolls are going to work with the very limited stats that we're doing. We want it to be a very rules light and low crunch game that is focused heavily on consequences of actions. And so getting that balance put in is kind of where we are right now.
Oh, and a quick little note. Todd, he does all our Sunday recordings and editing and all that fun stuff. So he's the man behind the scenes, but he's on today, so he's in front of the scenes.
Yay, Todd! Well,
I'm on both sides of the scenes today.
Well, I appreciate it.
We must have done such a great job that nobody has any questions for us.
I do have a question.
Go for it.
So, which is your favorite RPG or book that shows another region than you live in, like an instance for the for the Legend of the Five Rings that shows a fictional Japanese society?
I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure I followed the question.
I think the question was what's the most the setting you like playing the most, whichever representation of it is. It could be medieval Japan, it could be the Vikings, it could be anything. It could be...
Oh, see, on Japan specifically, I would say it's Legend of the Five Rings. I will say that the edition matters, but settings, that's always been one of my favorites for that.
My guilty pleasure will always be Street Fighter with their just absolutely insane version of Malaysia.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, same here.
I said my guilty pleasure is the Street Fighter RPG because they have an absolutely insane version of Malaysia. As
you still cut out at the end. I'm sorry.
By somebody. I'm having problems with the mic for some reason.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, the Street Fighter RPG's version of Malaysia is absolutely almost comedic and serious at the same time.
I haven't had a chance to try too many settings, to be honest, because since my gaming time is super limited, I usually stick to regular Dungeons and Dragons, and especially 5e these days. So, but I do it. I gave a quick try for sci-fi, and especially trying to go towards the game Traveler. And I have to say, sci-fi is a lot of fun. It feels like it's endless. You can basically go anywhere, and you have so many ways to make so many different words. Meaning, it's a nightmare for the GM. There's so much work when you want to run a proper traveler game.
On Guilty Pleasures, has anyone played Feng Shui?
Oh yeah, shot 20 guys with a musket in one round.
I know. Okay, you said Guilty Pleasures, but I love it. And as soon as Second Ed came out, I totally bought that as soon as I saw it, because I love it. So there.
I'm very fond of Blue Planet, which is a hard science fiction game that was originally put together by an engineer, a doctor, and an oceanographer. Their science is really hardcore. Second edition is much more playable because they got rid of the horrible bolt-on combat system from first edition and got an integrated combat mechanic that actually was playable. That said, it was the cover art for the first edition book that pulled me in. It's subtle and it's mysterious, and you just have to see it if you haven't. I don't think I can really describe it well enough. You have to see it. As far as representation of a place, though, I'd say my favorite representation of a place would be for 1879, and that would be Doré's Walk Through London. Let me just drop a link here for that, because the artwork on this is absolutely stunning. It's been around long enough that it's you just have to see it. One of the greatest artists of the 1800s did this. Did 180 pieces of scenes around London, and it is like the descent into Dante's Inferno, except it's the actual city of London, and you just have to see it. It's amazing work. On the topic of randomness, do you feel that more theatrical DMs use less random charts? I am very much a storyteller and theatrical GM. I don't use much in the way of random charts. Generally, I try to keep encounters in alignment with the storyline. If something is going to be a random occurrence, it's going to be disruptive, and I have to think about, is it appropriate to disrupt the storyline right now, or are the players, moving along with good momentum toward where they want to go? Do I want to mess with that? So yeah, I don't generally use them much in the way of random chart.
I think it depends on what type of random chart. Like an encounter random chart is very different than a name chart. Random chart for names, cool. Doesn't actually disrupt the theatrical storytelling aspect. So I think it depends on like what type of random charts are we talking about.
Good point. I keep a copy of Kate Monk's on Asticon up when I'm playing.
Like I said, I'm bad with names.
In those questions, it seems like it's usually encounter related.
I guess, and that may be, but like I said, there are so many different random charts out there that it's not just encounters. I am bad with names, so name generators is always They've got generators now that generate menus for your inns, pubs. Okay.
I can give you also, if you wish, another example on that.
Sure, please.
So, like right now, for my own campaign, I'm creating a new map, and the whole map is 80% randomly rolled. For many different reasons, though, which I can share if you want to. But is that something that other DMs do? Do you guys do that?
There are actually lots of cool tools for generating random hexes and random maps and all kinds of stuff. So I would definitely use them.
Okay. There's random generators for like critical hits, or I even have a dice that tells you where somebody hit. So that could be fun, especially if you have somebody who's not as. A lot of players will say things like, "I'm going to hit him with my sword," versus I'm, trying to chop him in half or cut off his head or whatever. So you can roll that and okay, well you hit him in the arm or whatever. And that's again a random either generator, chart, dice, which can be fun and can add to the game. I like random things sometimes.
Sorry to butt in, but I got a jet.
Let me answer.
But it was great talking to you guys, and I'll see you guys on the flip side.
Later, Ted.
Have fun.
Bye. Thanks for coming,
Take it
Todd.
easy.